Good morning, Chair and members. We're now live.
Thank you very much. Welcome to this virtual meeting of the Joint Staff Consultative Committee that's being conducted with members, officers and representatives of various locations, communicating via audio, video and online. Before this meeting starts, I'd like to invite the committee member and scrutiny officer, William Edwards, to explain how proceedings will work and to confirm that members and officers are in attendance.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start with a roll call. Begin with our councillors. Councillor Aspinwall.
I'm here.
Councillor Hoskins.
Yeah, here.
Councillor Strong.
Present.
Councillor Hunter.
Present.
Councillor Steers-Hanscom.
Present.
Our unison rep for today, Daniel Washington.
Yeah, present.
Thank you very much. And from the SCF, Christina Core. Sorry, can you just say that again? I couldn't quite hear you.
Here.
Thank you very much. And Matthew Catburn on IT. And our officers, Joe Kashishian.
Here.
And Ian Cooper.
Here.
Thank you very much. Extracts from the remote and partly remote meetings protocol are included with the agenda, and the full version is available on the Council's website, which includes information regarding live streaming, noise interference, rules of debate, voting, and Part 2 items. Members are requested to ensure that they are familiar with the protocol. Voting for this meeting will be with the blue raise hand button found under participants. I'll ask all members voting in favour of a motion to raise their hands, followed by all members abstaining, and so on. Are there any questions before we start the meeting? Thank you very much. I will now hand over to the chair.
That's lovely. Thank you very much, William. Okay, so item 1, we have apologies for absence, and I've received apologies from Councillor Terry Hone and been given due notice that Councillor Tony Hunter will be substituting for Terry Hone. So thank you, Tony Hunter, and yeah, thanks for being with us. We've also received apologies from Dee Levitt, Debbie Elans, Leah Ellis, Alison Foss and Andrew Betts. Are there any other apologies?
Yes, we've had apologies for Councillor Tyatt, and I'm substituting for her and having duly notified committee secretaries.
Thank you very much, Martin. Right, item 2 then, the minutes from the 16th of December 2020. We are being recommended to take as read and approves a true record the minutes of the meeting of the Joint Staff Consultative Committee on 16th of December 2020. Are there any questions, comments or amendments that anybody wants to make on those minutes? William, yes.
Chair, I have 2 amendments. One to correct an erroneous reference to the Southern Rural Committee in the introduction, which is obviously not the name of this committee, and I do also clerk that, which I think is the source of the mistake. And to correct Joe Kashishian's job title to Interim HR Services Manager throughout.
Lovely, thanks for that. And okay, so with those corrections, are there any other questions or comments or amendments on those minutes? Nothing, so I've got no hands up. All right then, so I now move that these that those amendments be put on the record and that the minutes mentioned above therefore be approved. Can I have a seconder?
Happy to second, Kate.
Thank you. Right, we just move to the vote now. Should we do it verbally or should we do it with raised hands? What would you prefer, William?
If all members voting in favour of that motion could raise their hands, please. Thank you, Chair. That's sufficient to carry.
Thank you very much. Okay, so item 3, notification of other business. There's no other business to be taken at this meeting. And now my announcements. So this meeting is being audio recorded as well as filmed. The audio recordings will be available to view on mod.gov and the film recording via the NHDC YouTube channel. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item, and the detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under the Chair's announcements on the agenda. And though I sound very well scripted, I've missed a bit, so I'm just going to revert back and say that I do now authorise the committee member and scrutiny officer to apply my digital electronic signature to the minutes that we have just approved a moment ago. Right then, okay, moving on to the substantive items then, item 5, the staff consultation forum. So it is for this committee to receive the minutes from December 2020, January 21 and February 21. And Ian Keeper, I think you're going to give us an introduction to those minutes.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I will cover a few areas. A lot of areas are duplicated in terms of content with the HR notes coming up next, so I'll leave some areas to discuss then, but obviously if you've got any questions on those, we can raise them either. In terms of areas that aren't covered in both, you'll note some references in the minutes of SCF to questions around the role of JSCC, SCF and Shaping Our Future. I think after a few discussions, I think we've established that all of them have valid contributions to make, all are valued meetings. They just need to sort of find the right place for them, which I think we're sort of starting to establish for all of them, which I think is a helpful discussion to have had. But I think it is good that we've got all those meetings in place to all those levels of engagement, both with officers and with members. There are a few references in there to home working expenses and just various questions around the amount that the council pays, which is £16 a month as a contribution, and then the possibility of claiming additional tax rebates in relation to those expenses as well. Sort of tried in those meetings to provide a summary to those in attendance and then to be distributed further on around how they could make tax claims, but that any tax is the individual's responsibility and not something for the council to get involved in. So that's what the various discussions were there and got raised on a few occasions. A lot of the other sort of topics of conversation are covered in the next paper. So the discussion around Shaping Our Future and the half-day land development mornings. It'll come to about how positive they've both been in the next item. Holiday flex is both covered in the next item and in the item on and the discussion paper as well on salary sacrifice schemes. NHS volunteering is covered next, but I'll talk about now in terms of we did put forward a number of volunteers. Unfortunately, there was no match between what NHS actually wanted in the end and what we could offer. But I suppose the good side of that is they did manage to get the people they needed from various sources, if it wasn't from us. And hopefully now the peak is over and they are managing much better with their own resources. And also covered in sort of a couple of places is the various activities that have evolved to sort of support people's well-being and engaging with each other. So references to the virtual kitchen, the knit and natter, and on top of that, there are also lots of other things going on in terms of team quizzes and all sorts of other things that people are doing to sort of keep themselves talking to each other that's not just about work. So I think that's kind of a summary of what's in there. Well, there is obviously a lot of content. Obviously, we'll welcome questions from members and also a contribution from Christina, who was the SCF rep as well. Obviously, she was at the meetings and can provide her own input, not just my take on what was discussed.
Thank you, Ian. Christine, can I invite you to have a say first, if there's anything you wanted to add?
Nothing to add. I think Ian's been very concise in what he's had to say, and I think the staff and the officers are very happy with what's been going on. Other than the fact we're stuck at home, but
all that time we had to drag ourselves into work, it felt so difficult, didn't it? But it wouldn't do now, that's for sure. Yeah, this is really encouraging, isn't it? And I think that what you've done socially is really, really impressive to keep people feeling engaged and keep those relationships and that camaraderie going. Has anybody got any questions or comments on these minutes? Councillor Claire Strong.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, I think, you know, completely new world that we're in, and I have to say, really pleased when we've had these discussions before about the staff, about them not feeling guilty to take time off to just interact as you would in an office environment. So really pleased that. I guess the bit that did sort of jump out at me was the bit on page 38 on the people recovery plans. And for a lot of people, working from home is an option where they enjoy working from home. It's an efficient use of their time, And I guess as we go into the sort of going forward, as we start to recover at some stage, when we know whether or not we're going to be actually back in the offices, it's looking at that again, keeping some flexibility for staff that want to do working from home, and not always having to feel that they had to come into an office if they are just as efficient or more efficient from working from home.
Thank you, Claire. Yeah, the item that you noted is in the next piece on the agenda.
Yeah.
I'll definitely pick it up then. But yeah, I think that's a really good point to note.
I thought I'd get in first.
Anybody else got any questions or comments? No? Okay. So our recommendation for this item, excuse me, is that we note them. So I don't need to second for that, I don't think, but if we can just move to a vote on whether we're happy to note these minutes. If you can raise your hand if you're happy to note those minutes.
Thank you, Chair. We'll take those as noted.
Thank you very much. Okay, so item number 6 then, the people strategy update, and this is to update us on progress made in the last quarter against HR work and projects and all the work that's been going on supporting people through COVID lockdown and the restrictions. And I'm going to hand over to Joe to present this for us.
It's me, Chair, if that's okay.
Oh, sorry, I've got it down. That's all right.
Work around, go to the other items, not to these two.
Joe's face was a bit. Go on then, Ian.
So yeah, I'll try and do a brief introduction to some of the key areas. So paragraph 3.2 refers to the draft people recovery plan attached to Appendix A. The idea of the plan is to take the learning from the pandemic and what we need to do to get back to a new normal, as well as what we want to carry on doing, what's actually sort of gone well as part of the pandemic in the response, in terms of things like home working, and as Councillor Strong mentioned, we aren't looking at going to everyone being back in the office in the same way as before, but giving people the opportunity to work from home more, which I think some people will relish, whilst on the other hand some people are desperate to get back into the building and do some working there. So it'll be a combination and depend on what people want to do and how we accommodate that. The plan itself has been reviewed by a leadership team and also was discussed at staff consultation forum last week. The main area of feedback from SCF was right at the end on page 37 in relation to the home working setup fees. I think in response to their comments, it was always a one-off allowance, that fee, and I think it had actually been claimed by pretty much everyone who's entitled to it. And as we move to a new way of providing IT equipment, which is to provide laptops, it kind of becomes a little bit redundant. We will continue to look at how we will provide other equipment, particularly things like desk chairs, and whether it's appropriate to provide those people who are working at home. I think it'll depend on how much they're working at home and what they've got access to. We don't want to have whoever on a desk chair, they've got no one to keep it, but equally those that are working at home 5 days a week, we don't want them getting bad backs from using inappropriate chairs and those kind of things. So again, it's kind of a case-by-case basis and sort of working towards what works best for everyone. Obviously, I would welcome any feedback from this group on that plan attached to Appendix A. We are looking now towards finalising that plan, because that will form the sort of structure for the HR work over the next year, 2 years, until we can get to a stage where we can move into a longer term people strategy. Paragraph 3.3.1 provides some statistics on recruitment. It's possible that the stats in relation to the application ratio, which has gone up, may be slightly skewed by the apprentice recruitment, which does tend to attract more applications per role than any other role we advertise. But also it could be an impact of there are less jobs out there and more unemployment, and therefore more people applying. So we need to sort of wait and see if that's a real trend or what's causing that. Paragraph 3.6 mentions holiday flex. We have got an update on that, but I'll leave that to Joe to cover in the later item, because it's quite a good one. Like we've got coming up on that area. In relation to paragraph 3.9 and shaping our future, I think we're still at the information gathering stage with that group, trying to map out what our desired culture is as an organisation, and how that impacts on what we need from our staff and from councillors, both in terms of training, development, and sort of that general skill set. I'm looking that we do move that on fairly quickly over the next few meetings to start to really think about what the next steps are and how we get there. And another key component of that is the inclusion group, which has had its first meeting, I think, earlier this week. And I want that to be a key part of shaping our future, because we need to make sure that everyone feels included as we go forward with that. The staff survey on paragraph 3.10.2, which is page 30 now. The staff survey, we'll come back to in a minute, has shown that not all teams yet have been able to engage with the half-day learning and development time, but for the ones that are engaging with it, they're finding it really positive. And in particular mentioned there is the latest session on equality and diversity training, and in line with the council motion from last year, that training will be rolled out to councillors fairly soon now, because the requirement of that motion was that everyone should complete it. So we need to get that out to you to let you do that. And yeah, in relation to that staff survey, which is mentioned in paragraph 3.10.4, only recently got the results out of that. So I'll just some brief highlights so far. Obviously, we do a lot more work into drilling into some of the detail. I think generally people are coping well, given the circumstances. Some quite good response rates in terms of agree with the sort of positive statements of 70% plus across the board. I think it is clear that there are some signs, particularly in comparing some of the like-for-like questions back to when we did this survey last year. People are starting to feel the strain, particularly from the increased workloads in areas where there is more work arising from COVID-19. It's not just the case of having to deal with the same workload, but doing it from home and in terms of doing it in different ways. It's that plus the additional workload as well. So that's certainly starting to feed in. And it also reflects the length of time as well that's been going on for some other areas where I think there is sort of strain in the figures, but this is probably stuff that will fall out again. It relates to sort of caring for people, and with homeschooling ending and children being back at school, that will start to have a positive impact on that one. And also there was a sign that people were more worried about getting ill from COVID in this survey, but it was done during February when we were still sort of early February when we were still in the midst of the second wave, third wave, and I think it did feel close to home to people. There were people knew who were getting ill with COVID, and so therefore it did feel close. So that did have an impact as well. But hopefully now that case rates are declining, that will also start to fall out of the figures as well. So I think all the responses are understandable, and yeah, I think we want to end as we all do. But I think hopefully the starting of some glimmering sight at the end of it all. We are starting to look at what going back to the office might look like, but I think what we're planning on doing is that once we get through probably April or May time, is start to ask officers again what they think it should look like. So do another staff survey to sort of talk about not just about how much they want to go back to the office, but also what they expect to be in place. Just sort of thinking about how much of a shock it might be going back into the office from working at home for so long, and how we can sort of ease that to be a more gradual and better process. I think that's all the sort of key points I wanted to cover, but as ever, happy to answer questions and anything else, or Joe will help out if I don't know the answer.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Ian. Joe, before we get into questions and comments, is there anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I think I'm happy to answer questions, of course, but yeah, there's nothing else. I think that I think Ian's covered out the main points.
Lovely, thank you very much. I do have a couple of questions. Oh, Anthony, you wanted to come in. Do you want to?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick point to follow on from what Ian was saying about that return to the workplace. The chief execs this week have been emailing each other, and we are going to sort of compare notes on what each other's plans look like. So we will sort of compare and contrast. Obviously, different councils will approach things slightly differently. As Ian rightly said, we're going to be talking to the staff to find out what their expectations are, and clearly what we want to deliver is against that. And it may be different authorities' staff have different expectations and therefore different return plans. But I think it'll be a useful exercise just to see what the others are doing, see if there are any good ideas that we can share amongst ourselves.
So thanks, Anthony. My first question is on that, really, just probably because of recentism. But with your return plans, are you and I don't know who the right person is to ask this to, but are you foreseeing a complete return to the usage of the office as it was before, or are you envisaging a partial return to what it was before? In which case, is there opportunity to reduce the amount of space that we have available?
Shall I come in first, and then Ian, if you want to add anything? So I think from the feedback we've had from staff so far, we're not expecting us to use the office in the way we did up to 12 months ago. We're anticipating people will want a different balance in their working from home, working in the office balance. I suspect lots of people will probably move to a sort of a 3-2 split, whichever way that goes. So whereas previously it was probably more 4-1, there were people that would work at home permanently, and they will no doubt continue to do so. But I think from the feedback we've had, people miss the social side of being in the office, and I don't mean sort of standing around for half an hour chatting over the kettle, but it's that ability to interact with people, and particularly those who live on their own or have been trying to homeschool or have other caring responsibilities, or whatever it has been that they've been having to juggle through the pandemic. I think there will be a sense of relief for some about the ability to get back into the office, but there are definite upsides to working at home. So we're expecting the balance to change. Certainly the first survey we did last year suggested, I think it was 80% wanted to work from home more than they had done pre-pandemic. So we will be checking to see if that is still the same. Our working assumption is that we will return and use one less floor in the office than we did pre-pandemic. And then that would open up opportunities to do something different with that floor. That's the working assumption, but obviously we need to test that, and then we need to plan on what that return looks like. But I'll hand over to Ian if there's anything additional he wants to say.
Similar theme really, but reading through the comments attached to the staff survey briefly the other day, it's very clear that there are groups of people who are desperate to come back, but there are also groups who actually see this huge value in just working from home almost permanently, which haven't worked at home before. So I think it's going to be a mix, but I think on average people will be working at home a lot more, and I think maybe even working differently in the office when they come back as well. Certainly one of the requirements, if we are going to use one less floor, is that traditionally, even though we've had hot desking, is people have still drifted towards their teams, and they've had little team hub areas and almost been a little bit territorial. But yeah, that's probably something that will change as well. It will be much more open, and people can sort of sit where they want to sit. Hopefully the use of technology will allow sort of hybrid meetings as well, so people will be able to keep in touch with their work colleagues from home much better with laptops and webcams and meeting rooms that are better enabled. So I think there's lots of opportunities to be a lot better, and I think, you know, while people are missing social contact and see that linking to work, obviously there's people also missing social contact from their friends as well, and you know that's part of what will be a positive as well. People can work from home and have other social contact and still be happy. I don't necessarily work for that.
Yeah, thank you. I think, and Joe, just before I go to you, so I think you may be able to answer this as well, is the real question that I guess I'm asking is, if there is going to be a reduction in office space, obviously that residency of your desk is going to have to go, so storage and all those things need to be considered. But if there is to be a reduction of space that could be commercially viable for us, would that therefore, would we get to a point where you are needing to dictate the amount of time that is spent in the office and put limits on that? I think that's the consultative approach is brilliant, and it's really great to see that. But I'm wondering whether it would get to a point where you would need to say, actually, you can only spend 2 days a week because that's all the space that we've got. Joe, I don't know whether you can answer that. I know that your hand's up. You wanted to come in on something else.
My point was just to add to really what Anthony and Ian have already said around, just to kind of highlight, there's a couple of teams that significantly have not been able to work from home prior to the pandemic. So home working was very new. So customer service team, for example, and also the Careline team. And I'm not quite sure from the point of view of the discussions at leadership team whether or not there's a view that they all need to come back in. I would suspect not, but or whether or not that will make up a proportion of those people that want to work from home more. Really, that was my key point there.
Interesting. So impact on service as well. Claire, if I come to you now, I know I've got Ian's hand up as well, but I think this is all one and the same, I'm hoping. Claire Strong? We can't hear you, Claire. I can't.
May have to log back out and come back in. That sometimes solves it.
Ian, if I come to you while Claire's doing that.
Yeah, I think Anthony might want to answer as well, but in terms of your question, Chair, I think that naturally we'll be able to release the floor. I don't think it's going to require anything to achieve that. I think we weren't fully utilising the space we had pre-pandemic, and I think with the change we'll easily get there. It is just a case of using the space better, i.e. people using all the desks that are available and not just using the desks on the floor they're on. Obviously we need social distancing to disappear to enable that, so it's not going to be anytime soon. But yeah, I think we'll achieve it anyway. I mean, if we have to, we'll start to look at desk booking systems and reducing the requirements, but I honestly don't think to get to that level we need to.
No, I agree with Ian. Traditionally, we haven't taken the approach of making people work at home. It's always been a demand-led approach, effectively. And I'd be reticent about forcing people. And as Ian said, I think the results so far show that it will take care of itself, essentially. With regard to what Joe said about some of the service areas who've never worked from home being able to, all the fun of working from home. We haven't specifically discussed those service areas at leadership team. I'd be led by the managers for those service areas as to what their view is. And if we did get to the stage where, as Ian said, we did have to proactively manage it a bit more, I think that would be absolutely fine to do. So I think back to the example of when we were up in Town Lodge, whilst we were refurbing the DCO, we obviously had far fewer desks up there, and we did have to proactively manage it. So I was managing the legal team at the time. We had, I think it was 8 people and 5 desks, and we had a rota so that we knew who was going to be in on which days. And that worked absolutely fine. It just needs a bit of discussion and cooperation amongst the teams.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And just, sorry, Claire and Tony, I know that you both want to come in, but just one last question from me on this. Are you looking at an activity-based working model like HCC to stop that residency issue, or is it going to be managed differently? I don't know who can answer that.
We've not got an answer yet. I think we'll still provide some storage for people to keep some things like their personal items. So I think that's going to naturally lead to some people drifting towards certain areas of the building. But I think I guess the fact that there will not be enough seats necessarily where you want to sit will force people to move around a bit more. But no definitive answer yet on how we'll manage that. But I think to a degree it will take care of itself, but we will manage it if we need to.
You could have a silent floor, couldn't you? High focus floor, and yeah. Anyway, exciting. Claire Strong, is your hand still up? Your hand isn't up, but you are back.
I'm back. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Brilliant.
Don't know why I dropped out. No, just on the coming back into the office, and I know Anthony mentioned about having, 5 desks for 8 people. I mean, when I was a home worker, if I wanted to go into my office of the company, which was down in London, I just booked one. Never knew who I'd be sitting next to, but it was all the desk spaces that were, if you like, the hot desking areas. They were just bookable, and then if there's a group of us that wanted to get together, we just make sure we all booked sort of 3 desks up, if we could, closest together. But it's something to look at rather than having to say people on a rotation on that basis. The comment that I wanted to make actually was more about it's gone on my page. You were introduced these monthly half-day sessions, which started in January, I believe. And I kind of looked at that and I thought, oh, good topics there. But the next one I think is going to be, is it on leadership skills? And I wondering how is that applicable to all staff or just some of the more of the management team in the organisation? So more of a question of these half-day sessions, which I have to say I'm very pleased to see that we're doing something like that, because again it's a driving new ways of working and engaging with the staff.
And did you want to come in on that, or Joe?
Well, I can say that the 2 paragraphs are unrelated. They're just the formatting. I think it just looks a bit odd. No, the next session is not on leadership. That's a separate activity program we're doing just for senior managers. I don't think, and John, I don't we've got a theme for the next one yet. I think we're leaving it quite open. The next one, yes, the next one's an open theme, so teams can determine the training that they need, which is always the intention, to do a combination of themed and non-themed ones, just to allow the teams to do sort of professional development and that kind of thing.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think it's the way it's written, actually, the way that paragraph is done, it's sort of dropped underneath. So apologies, I read it wrong.
Thank you. Thanks, Claire. Yeah, brilliant. That's an incredible achievement, isn't it, to be able to develop everybody in that way. Councillor Tony Hunter, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Chairman. It's been partially answered, and like Claire, I had an office in the north of England, and we used a hot desk and just phone up and make arrangements to actually go in, have a desk, or have a meeting with 2 or 3 colleagues. So it was easily managed. And I think on staff return, the thing I do like is it is coming down to staff choice. I think that's all important, because as you've said earlier, the people that want to come back can, and those that want to spend time working at home, it's much better. The other thing I picked up on reading the papers was the rolling over annual holidays over a 2-year period. I think that's an excellent idea, because obviously with the way the staff have been under certain pressures, annual leave has been something that's been shelved. So actually not losing it and rolling it over a 2-year period. But obviously that comes down to man management again, and actually making sure that everybody doesn't go on holiday at the same time.
Excellent.
Just come in on that. There is also a benefit for the organisation of rolling it across 2 years, which is it smooths out that excess leave across a longer period of time. Otherwise, we would have found in the next civic year lots of people disappearing off to use their time up. So I think it's a win-win all round to do it that way. And we'll keep it under review as the situation develops.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, if there are no more questions or comments, then we are being asked to note this update. So I don't need to second it for that, but I do propose that we note this update, and we're happy with it. So can we just go to a vote and raise hands on that, please? Everybody happy to note?
Thank you, Chair. We can take that as noted.
Lovely, thank you. All right then, The discussion topic for this meeting is, oh no, it's not that discussion topic, but it is the topic that we asked to be updated on, which is equalities. And again, I've got it as Jo is presenting. I hope that's right. Yes, it's brilliant. Okay, Jo, take it away.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so this is just our annual update on equalities. Quite a lot of information there, of course, just to kind of note that the staff figures are taken as a snapshot on the 31st of December 2020, and the starter and leaver figures are totals for the full year, January to December. We've used percentages in the data really instead of raw numbers, just to make sure that we protect confidentiality, and it's also really important to point out that not all staff provide all of the information relating to every protected characteristic. This is something that they fill in via the employee self-service personal data form. So just in terms of, sort of key points to pick out, there's obviously a wealth of data here, so I don't want to kind of go into too much detail, and figured we could probably just pick up comments and questions after that. But the figures will, which describe our workforce profile have been fairly stable over a number of years. Just wants to kind of highlight on gender, there's been a reduction of female appointments this year, which has been the lowest for 3 years. On disability, we've now got more staff declaring a disability. This is now showing as the highest percentage for 4 years. We think that might be down to the ease of accessing the form on the new iTrent system, which was introduced in April. However, in terms of recruitment on disability, there were no appointments made in 2020 from those declaring a disability. On ethnic origin, there have been increases in both appointments, up 11%, but also on leavers from ethnic minority backgrounds in 2020. Been a decrease of around 4% in the new appointments from the LGBT groups. Only 2 appointments from 36 in 2020 compared to 8 appointments from the 81 appointments in 2019. So kind of worth noting, obviously the numbers were quite low for that group, very low anyway, but recruitment, as we've said, has also declined in the past year. In terms of age, employees aged 45 to 54 remain the largest age group, as they have been for the last few years, and accounts for almost 1/3 of all staff. Changes to marital status and religion have been very minimal, nothing really significant to note there. On part-time versus full-time workers in 2020, the number of full-time employees dropped to 63% in 2020, which is the lowest in 5 years. And the percentage of the full-time workforce who are female has fallen by 3% to 57%, which follows 3 years of growth. And on the long-term sick figures, we noted that the long-term sick cases in numbers has remained fairly stable, but perhaps concerningly, the percentage of females taking long-term sick has increased to 91% of all cases, which follows an increasing trend over the last 3 years. So the HR team are due to meet, investigate this further to determine whether there's any significant factors behind that trend. Also in the same paper are the gender pay gap figures for 2020. And this is based on a snapshot of salary data on 31st of March 2020. The data is required to be published on the government website as well as the council's website. Usually the deadline for this is the 31st of March on the following year. Some of you might know that this has now been postponed to October of this year, although that decision was made just after we'd already published our data. So our 2020 gender pay gap data is already up on the website. Probably the key points to raise around this are that there have been improvements in the average differences in the pay for women compared to men at the council. However, when we use the mean figures, there's still a gap, obviously, in terms of females earning around £140 a week less, or £7,000, 291 a year less than males. There's a number of contributing factors to that, but one of them is that the differences in the proportion of females in the upper quartile is still considerably lower than in the other quartiles, but this has increased by nearly 7% since 2019, which is a positive sign. And overall, we've had a narrowing of the mean and the median gender pay gaps in 2020, which has brought them to their lowest levels since we started reporting in 2017, which obviously shows we're moving in the right direction. That was it from me. You're on mute.
I just said lovely things about you. That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Jo. Yeah, a really interesting set of data there, and very, very thorough as well. Have we got any questions or comments from anyone? I've got no hands up, which I'm surprised by. I just wanted to talk then very briefly about some of the age stuff, and I think it was Anthony, was it you that was saying in our previously around appointments of kind of the amount of applicants we get at an age group versus the appointments. Was it you that was highlighting that?
I think if I can come in, I think we were talking about this at the maybe the leaders briefing a few weeks ago. I think the point we picked up was that we'd had a really high proportion of applicants for the apprentice posts we advertised in August. I think we had over 100 applications for 3 posts, which I think kind of skewed a little bit the number of applicants per age band. I think that was the point that Anthony had put out. And as I think Ian referred to today as well, it kind of perhaps has also increased the number of applicants per post. So in some of the more technical professional posts, that are traditionally quite hard to fill. I think we filled more of them this year than we might have done previously, because there's a better, higher demand for positions overall. But we still see quite a low number of applicants for, say, a lawyer post compared to an apprentice post or a lower skilled role.
I think, Chair, if I could come in. It's obviously been an odd year for recruitment. And I think there's some very positive things in those numbers. And long may say the closing of the gender pay gap continue, and we will continue to work to improve that. But it has been a bit of an odd year to try to sort of draw any hard and fast conclusions from. I know, for example, that we recruited someone really good into planning because they're able to work from home. They live nowhere near North Hertfordshire. And because we're all working from home, it's enabled that sort of appointment to take place in the way that it perhaps might not have done in the past. Equally, I was interested to see the higher number of women that have left over the past 12 months. And what you don't know is whether that is linked in some way to the pandemic. Is it linked into caring responsibilities because of how society is traditionally set up? That burden tends to fall disproportionately on women. So has that had an impact? And we won't really know until we're doing this exercise next year to see whether some of these things are trends, whether some of these things are problems that we need to identify. And Jo has flagged a couple of things that we'll be investigating more, which is obviously really helpful, or whether this is start of different trends. Final thing I wanted to mention just on the age point is that our new diversity and inclusion group, which has been set up, their first meeting is going to be all things to do with age. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that.
Yeah, I can probably add to that actually, Anthony. It was Monday this week that we met. So yeah, we've had a really good discussion. We were really pleased to have a good range of ages attending. So I think there was about 14 of us in total. We did a little bit of chivvying around because I know there was a significant proportion of over 45s in the group. So we wanted to make sure we had some some just younger people generally across the age ranges and so on. But yeah, we had some good discussions. We did look at the age profile, so some of the data that has come out of the equalities report we shared. but the discussion was quite sort of wide ranging really. We talked a little bit about career progression, maybe the impact of the flatter structure on reducing the traditional kind of career ladder type opportunities. We talked a little bit about the need perhaps for all of us to be a bit more open to sideways moves, to increasing sort of breadth of experience. We also talked a little bit about whether offering secondments and mentoring would help with that. One point was raised about whether or not having a degree was becoming more kind of essential or expected in quite a wide range of careers, not just those kind of traditional professional roles perhaps. There were comments around sort of from younger people, kind of saying that, they've obviously got, just because they're new to they might be relatively new to the council and relatively new to the world of work. That's not to say they haven't got kind of valuable experience that they bring with them. We also linked in with that was a kind of around sort of the need for us to be able to allow for mistakes, and somebody linked that into the sort of the peer challenge feedback around sort of the organisation needing to be sort of brave and risky and so on. And the other kind of topics were around sharing information around menopause, knowing that it's helpful for people to understand the impact of that on those that they're working with or managing. And also there were some discussions at the end around pensions and the need for younger people to understand the importance of pension, but also perhaps further through the career as well, making sure that people have got the right access to the right pensions information going forward to sort of benefit them in their retirement.
That's a really rich discussion. How long was that meeting?
It was just under 2 hours. But yeah, we were really pleased with I think everybody made a contribution, and yeah, it was we were very pleased. I said it was the first it was the second meeting. The first meeting was to really kind of set ground rules and kind of terms of reference and how we were going to progress, which was in December. But we're due to meet quarterly on a different area of protected characteristics, and we're focusing on disability in June.
That's absolutely brilliant, and I think just well done to all of you for making sure that comes together and that is that rich and that diverse. In terms of the actions that are coming out of that, then, so the discussions were had, which is great. Is that leading into actions, and is that feeding into your strategy?
Yes. So so the group itself is kind of almost like, well, I chaired it this month. Ruben from the corporate policy team chaired it last time. We decided that the process we'll share is that we will reconvene after the meeting once the notes have been typed up and just look at kind of potential actions and feedback through to the Shaping Our Future group and also the leadership team, but with some suggestions, and then provide an update at each meeting. But I'll make sure that we cover that off in our next JSCC update as well.
Yeah, brilliant. I think that's a great to have as a standing item here. I think that's a really useful update. Is there anything that you think, because I'm getting a lot of interest around this group, and I think it is as valuable as the SCF really, in terms of some of the richness of the conversations that can happen there. And I think this committee, and I'm sure I'm speaking for others here, would like to be as useful as possible. So is there a way that we can make that a standing item, and for you that committee, that group, to be asking things of us if there's anything that they want from us in terms of would they like us for ideas or scrutiny of certain stuff, or how can we help with sort of the governance of that and making sure that the rich discussions turn into really rich actions?
It's a bit of a tough question. I think it's something we can go back to. I know you'd asked at our previous meeting, or the leader briefing, which was, I don't know, forgive me now, about 3 weeks ago, I think, or something. We did talk briefly at the SCF meeting at the beginning of the month about discussion topics. What I said I would do is kind of share some ideas in terms of there was nothing burning that kind of sprang to mind really. But I think we've talked a little bit about the minutes from the last meeting and sort of homeworking as a topic, and I think we've already chosen that as a discussion topic for June, have we not? So I think from that point of view that's probably key for now, but I certainly will continue to kind of see if there's ideas that we can share from the SCF and inclusion group to feed in.
Thank you. One final point on the inclusion group, but I haven't got any other hands up, but do stick your hand up if you'd like to join in. We were discussing, I think it was at ONS, or it might have been FAR, I don't know, all the days have turned into one this week. But at one of the meetings I had this week, it was raised about the inclusion group and whether or not we were extending the work of that group or any of the findings of that group to our community engagement. So I realised that that is a different kind of side of the same coin, but I just wondered whether there was an opportunity for community engagement to be aware of what's happening internally and for us to maybe learn those lessons and translate that externally with how we're engaging with community. And I think that came from ONS last night. Keith, you might be able to say yes or no on that, or Martin, you were there too.
I come in. I'm not sure it was last night because I was also there and don't remember. Albeit I was, as those of you who were there will know, I was having to manage a baby at the same time as being part of the meeting. I think the original idea of the inclusion group was that it would be an internal group only. With that said, it was never my intention to be prescriptive as to how they ran their own meetings. And where the attendees wanted to take the discussions. So if there was a view from within the group that either bringing in external people on particular subjects, or if there was an issue that they were discussing that they thought had wider wider implications for the council and the community, then it can be spun out from there. I haven't got any issues with that. But I think almost it's a point we can put to them, but let the inclusion group decide effectively. As I said, it wasn't intended to be an outward facing community engagement group. It was intended to be an internal one, and I guess the people have probably put themselves forward for the group on that basis, and we wouldn't want to necessarily change the dynamic because we're wanting to create a safe space in which they can have some very open discussions so that we can know what's going on with our staff. And I think if you change the dynamic there is a bit of a risk that you might do some of that. But I think it's something for the group to think about.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it does need to be a safe space so that people can feel that they can be open and honest. I think the other thing, from the flip side, is that we've got Ruben's team, and Ruben is obviously the manager for community engagement and policy, so that kind of links in with sort of the more corporate approach, as well as just sort of the staffing or human resources side of things. And there is somebody from the community engagement group that's represented on the inclusion group. So I think from that point of view, it's good to kind of have a good mix.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you, Jo. Ian, you've got your hand up.
Yes, so first to confirm it was FAR on Monday. It was one of our tangents discussions we had in FAR. We sort of got a bit off topic. As I suppose just to add the response, it will feed into shaping our future, which is around organisational culture. So if we spot themes that are there within the staff cohort, it probably might be there in terms of the looking outwards as well. And shaping our future is definitely about the internal and the external. So I think that would provide a link into how we address both at the same time and can then sort of use those themes to do that work.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you. Martin.
Yeah, I was just going to say that while I agree with the points about you want this group to be a safe space so that people can engage with their own experiences, but there is, of course, in terms of this committee, a feed on to recruitment. If it's very clear that we encourage all the different protected groups within the council, then that's a good environment in terms of recruitment to encourage a greater number from all the different characteristics to be involved. So I think there is a feed through it, as Ian said, in other areas like shaping our future, but also in terms of specifically in recruitment.
Thank you. I think, really great responses to that. Thank you. And it was FAR, and I do recall now the discussion. There were some odd ones, but yeah, I think I will report back to FAR that there is a good link between the two, and that and also that this is being managed very well in terms of the keeping that safe space. It's a delicate balance, isn't it, to try and ensure that you've got an opportunity for people to speak safely and have that psychological security, and then also acting upon that and doing things that make a real difference without giving the burden of the workload to those that have had to show the courage to say what they need to say. So yeah, it's I get it. It's a very difficult thing. I will definitely report that back to FAR, and thank you for answering that. Councillor Claire Strong.
Sorry, me again. Wealth of data. Love looking at it. Question though, full-time, part-time. That was one where there seemed to be the biggest change in the number of staff moving from full-time. It was a drop of 7% on the workforce. For me, I thought that seemed quite a significant large drop. I just wondered if there was anything behind that. Is it because a lot of those that are moving or movement to part-time working, is that because a lot of our staff are female?
I don't think I've got a strong answer for you on that one. Actually, it's something that needs looking into a bit more. But I do agree, it's there is a change there. I don't think it's a conscious effort or a conscious.
No, it just intrigued me. I thought, oh, that's from years ago on a trending. That's quite a big. I mean, I know we've had a incredible year. And again, when you look at that, is it related because of the year that we've had? It's whether or not there's an underlying, if there was anything underlying it. Maybe it's just something we note and check next year, or see if there is an underlying trend. It did seem quite a significant change.
I agree. When I was reading this, that was one of the points that I thought may relate to the pandemic, but that's an assumption on my behalf that may be incorrect, because obviously people are having to juggle a lot at the moment. And I do know anecdotally that we have had some staff that have reduced their hours in order to better manage what's going on. So I'm not sure, and I don't know, Joe, if you know whether that change is linked to part-time staff being recruited in, or whether it's previously full-time staff requesting and being allowed to go part-time. Do we know what's driven that change?
No, I'm sorry, I haven't really got that information to hand. Although we are meeting as a team towards the end of the month to kind of look into a bit more detail.
I think it's just understanding it, because I think it's if it is some of those reasons, then I think that's tremendous credit to us as an employer that we have such a degree of flexibility in the staff, that we can retain staff and allow them to have reduced hours or more flexible hours, etc., to work into their personal circumstances. But it also means if somebody's doing that, that means there is then a sort of a vacancy creation, because that work still either has to be taken up by the rest of the team, or we need to bring somebody else in who's perhaps another part-time worker or whatever. So I just think it's interest. I just think we need to understand it and what the impact is onto recruitment. If it is because we're allowing our employees to have greater flexibility, what does that do in terms of pressure to the rest other team members? If there is, if there's, sort of a vacancy gap because somebody is taking less hours.
Yeah. I mean, we every year we get flexible working requests for people to change from full-time to part-time. But if I'm honest, it doesn't feel like we've had a significant increase in that. But it could be that we've, as Anthony said, maybe we've had a slight increase in part-time recruitment and a reduction in full-timers maybe, but there's nothing that springs to mind that really explains that. So I think that's something we can look at. One of the last questions one of the last points I just wanted to add actually was that you might see from the note that the information note was pulled together by one of my colleagues, Maggie Williams, who would perhaps ordinarily come to JSCT to present the report herself, but she's on leave this week. I think we generally do a twice-a-year update on equality, so maybe that's something that we can pick up in September. But I don't know if there's any other kind of points. I think Maggie was kind of aware we provide you, as you said, with a plethora of data there, but I don't know if there's any particular areas or the different kind of format that would be helpful. I don't know if members have got ideas on something they'd like to see differently?
Just on the part-time working, I mean, do you look at it as classed of those that are doing sort of 30 hours a week versus 20 hours a week, just to get a bigger feel or not?
We don't at the moment. I think everything that's under a full-time contract is 37, and everything else is classed as part-time, whether that's 10 hours a week or 33 hours or something. But we could certainly provide some sort of a different breakdown just to kind of look at that. And I think over the last few years, obviously not specifically this year because the town hall's been closed for a significant amount of time, but we have increased, for example, casual contracts for bar staff and catering staff in the town hall for the events team and so on. So that might have increased, but yeah, that won't have increased in the last 12 months. So we need to go back and kind of look.
Well, unless you've been operating illegally, I don't think that place has been open much in the last 12 months, has it, Keith?
A bit during last summer.
Sorry, Chair, I need to leave for another meeting, which I realise I'm a minute late to. So thank you all.
Off you go. Thank you, Anthony.
Bye.
All right. Okay. If there are no further questions or comments on that, I think, oh, let me just go back to my other document. I think we just need to note this report. I just want to say thank you very much, Joe, for providing us with all of this data and obviously your team's right. It was a really, really useful report to read through, and thanks for answering all of those questions. So if everyone is happy, I'm going to move that we note this report, and we'll just need to do a quick vote on that.
Thank you, Chair. We can take that as noted.
Thank you very much. Moving on then to item number 8, and that is our discussion paper on salary sacrifice schemes, which I believe we talked about quite recently, didn't we, Joe? Over to you for this one.
Okay, so this is just a bit of an update, really. As you're probably all aware, we sort of use salary sacrifice schemes as a way of helping us to attract new employees and retain our existing ones. We talk about salary sacrifice where an employee agrees to exchange part of their salary to get a non-cash benefit from us as their employer. There's obviously tax benefits for them to do this, as the deduction is taken away from their gross pay, resulting in lower tax deductions. And there's also benefits for us as an employer due to lower national insurance contributions that we make as employers. Obviously, making the deduction requires an amendment to the individual's contract, and we also need to check that the deduction from salary doesn't take their average hourly rate below the national minimum wage. So there's sort of payroll checks that are involved as well. There have been a number of salary sacrifice schemes that we've run over the years, but there were some changes made by government in 2017 that basically changed the tax advantages to some of those. So we've only got sort of a smaller number that now remain. The current childcare voucher scheme, unfortunately, is closed to new applicants since the government introduced their tax-free childcare scheme. So we've now got just 10 active members remaining, but as I said, there are alternative provisions there for new employer and new parents. On the cycle to work scheme, we've been running this in various guises since 2013, and most recently the scheme was opened in December 2019 with a handful of employees opting to take up the opportunity at that point before we had the impact of lockdown and office closures and so on. So that's currently on hold until the offices reopen, and we hope if the offices reopen in the summer, then that's always a good time for people to be thinking about using their bikes to get to work, and hopefully we'll get some further interest in that scheme. Holiday Flex, which is one of our newest schemes, we've kind of mentioned it, I think, in the HR update as well. This is the purchase of additional annual leave, offers the employees opportunity to purchase up to an extra week's annual leave each year. We ran an initial trial in August, and there were 7 applications. We've recently opened the window for further applications for the new holiday year, and we received 10 applicants in total, 6 of which were sort of repeat customers, if you like, repeat purchases, and we do hope that there'll be more interest in this scheme once the travel restrictions are lifted and we sort of come into the summer months and so on. It's worth noting that obviously the the smoothing. We've talked about the smoothing of annual leave and annual leave being carried forward from the current year into the next year or two. That will also perhaps have a bit of a negative impact. Whilst people have got lots of leave, they're not likely to want to sacrifice salary to purchase more. And then just finally, in terms of sort of further considerations for this type of scheme, there are a couple of others that we could consider. The additional pension contribution scheme and also the ultra low emissions vehicles. I think it's fair to say that there can be a bit of administration in setting up and running these schemes, which includes things like making the necessary payroll changes and regular checks, as well as promoting the schemes to encourage the take up, which obviously then benefits us as an employer as well. And we will need to assess the level of staff interest before we further consider any further schemes.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions or comments on this? Or any additional remarks? Martin?
Yes, just with the newest scheme, which is around additional annual leave, just wondering whether, particularly where in areas where teams are very much under pressure, whether there's any restriction on those people that can apply. I mean, is it dependent on the agreement of managers, team leaders, and so on? How does that actually work?
Everybody's eligible to apply, but it's still subject to management approval. And I guess the consideration would be if somebody's purchasing an extra week, but they've already got perhaps quite a lot carried over, then it wouldn't make sense. But yeah, we've kind of got that check in place to.
I'm sure that's the case. Yeah. But I was rather concerned that we should make it clear that that is how it works. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Keith?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Are we undertaking the short survey, Joe, already on this ultra low emissions vehicles? I'm quite keen to see that.
Not yet. We probably will do later this year, but we haven't started that yet.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, that one will be interesting to see the outputs of, won't it? I think. Yeah. Okay. Anything else for conversation on salary sacrifice? No. Okay. But we are being asked to note this. No, we're not being asked to do anything. We were asked to debate it, but there doesn't appear to be an awful lot of comment on it, and that's absolutely fine. It was great to be updated on that. Thank you. I'll move on to the next item then, which is strategic discussion topics to discuss going forward. And thank you, Joe, for providing us with kind of papers of what we've discussed in the past. I think that is an important thing to look at. We have agreed that next time we meet, this committee meets, we will talk about the challenges and rewards of long-term home working, which I think is that something we've agreed, or is that a suggestion? I think we've agreed that, haven't we?
I think it's a good one to do, actually, particularly when we say that last year there was 80% at the beginning of the pandemic who were keen on home working. I'm just going to be interested to see what the percentage is, having experienced a year of home working, whether people are still as enthusiastic about it.
Yeah.
It's a bit premature.
Hope not.
Is that a serious comment, Claire? Are you...
Well, it is, because by June I wouldn't have thought we would have been out of lockdown, and I would have thought maybe we would want to wait a bit until maybe some staff are actually back in the office again, if we were looking at it. That's all, because I mean,
it feels to me, and Anthony obviously has had to leave, but maybe Ian, you might be able to help with this, but it does feel to me as though by June, the conversations with regard to the office and what that return might look like and the reduction in space, etc., those conversations will have progressed a certain way, a certain amount. And so actually it might be a good idea for us to then have a conversation to say.
But just, I know that our meeting's June, sorry I'm jumping in, but to be able to bring something to as a paper in June, that means you've got to be doing your work and research sort of end of April, May. And I'm thinking, is that just a bit early to be asking officers to bring that back to us then?
Martin, if I can go to you, yeah.
Can I come in on this, Chair? I think Claire's got a point, actually. I think when we put it together last time, we probably didn't think the lockdown would have lasted this long. And there's nothing to stop us putting it back a meeting. And it seems to me, looking at the list of opportunities, if we're looking at other subjects, that the employee assistance programme, and because I know we've made it very clear, but not just to staff, but also to councillors, that that's available. And it might be worth having a look at the value of that, how well it's been used, and reviewing that. So I would suggest that's an additional topic.
Joe, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just checking I've got my mute off. Yeah, it was just to kind of really a sort of a slightly separate kind of slant on that, really. So the challenges and rewards as a topic of home working, long-term home working, was probably been on the discussion topic list for some time. I might be wrong. It might all be that it's been proposed as a current topic because of where we were. Of course, the council have been having some staff working from home on a basis for the last 10 years, and I suppose it was kind of that long term, not on a kind of on the last 10 years. So just a kind of different view from really. I kind of certainly agree with Councillor Strong's point that we would need to be starting to write a paper sort of the end of April, when we perhaps are also going to be in the office, and it won't have been around a year, I suppose. But yeah, I'm happy to go either way, really.
So what I think I'm hearing then is that we should perhaps move that topic to the meeting in September, and then for the meeting in June we could look at the EAP. Yeah. Sorry, I was expecting to hear, and I forget I have to look at the screen for the nods. Do we want to make recommendations past September, or I'm mindful that it might not be the same people in the room, so they might want to have a different discussion. I think the only thing that I wanted to point out on there is that it does feel like we've gone quite a long time without actually looking at any sort of employment law update, and I think that they are always really useful to bring out a range of topics, and actually a range of topics that at that moment might be more pertinent. And so I think that's the only thing that I kind of wanted to point out, really, is that it's been a while since we've had that, but I can't see it on there. So we've got the next two sorted, and then if we could have a recommendation for the next one of employment, of the December one of employment law, but it might not be us having that conversation.
We can always put something in and leave it to the new committee, as we always do each year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we still have elections almost every year.
Great. Okay. Well, I think that just about wraps us up then, unless anyone's got anything else that they want to say. No? Well, I don't know if I'll be doing this again in June, but if I am, then great. If not, thanks ever so much for holding my hand through this. And I hadn't expected to do this at the beginning of the year, but this has been actually my favourite meeting of all of the billions of meetings I have to go to. This one's my favourite, and I don't say that to everyone. So I definitely don't say that at M&S. So yeah, thank you very much, and that's a wrap. Well,
okay.
Thank you,
Chair.
Thank you. Thanks, Kate.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.